So at this point, when we were doing the the inequality problems, that's when I asked you guys, you need to stop and judge your answers, right? Can we be both bigger than 2 and less than negative 4.5, right? And so I had you guys asking yourself that and question. And it seemed maybe kind of pointless when we were doing those, because it seemed like pretty much any time we started off with an and problem, we ended up with an and problem. We started off with an or problem, we ended up with an or problem. Where really I was kind of training you to do this. Okay, I was having you ask yourself those questions in those moments so that you know how to do it now, because we don't start off with a compound inequality. We start off with just this single inequality, but now we have 2 inequality answers. So now our answer is a compound inequality, and we have no idea how it's set up because it didn't start off as one. Okay, so we got to stop and ask ourselves: can a number be bigger than 2 and less than negative 4.5? Or the other way you can ask yourself is, are there any numbers that are bigger than 2 and less than negative 4.5? So is that a yes or a no on that? Can the number be right? So Andrea, since it's no, what does that mean? We have to say no to our and. Yeah, so it's an or. Okay. So what do we do, right? How do we write an or? So what I would suggest, really just need to throw the word or between the 2 answers. But what I would suggest is to go ahead and take the smaller of the 2. So in that case, the negative 4.5, and bring that over to the left side. So x is less than negative 4.5. And then or, and then x is greater than 2. So by ordering it this way, you're going to make the graphing easier for yourself. Okay. And then so when we go to graph our answer on the number line, okay. And so because I have a fraction here, or a decimal, right, we go to between the 2 integers. Okay, so I'm going to put an open circle since it's not equal to where 4.5 should be, negative 4.5 should be. And then I'm going to label it. And then since it says x is less than means graph to the left. So all those numbers to the left of negative 4.5. And then x is greater than 2, so I'm going to put an open circle on 2. And then greater than means to the right. Okay. So we have our answer written, we have it graphed. We know that it makes sense because or problems should have the answers where they go out away from each other. Okay. If it was an and, then the arrow should point towards each other. I did see a couple people in different classes, had arrows pointing in the same direction. That's never good. So if they both point right or they both point left, that's letting you know that something's going wrong with your problem. They shouldn't do that. They should either go away from each other or toward each other. Okay. Those are your options here with what we're doing. And just again, what does that mean? All right, what did we find? All right, we're finding the numbers that when we plug them in, make this work. All right, and so what we're saying is that if I plug a number in that's over here, like negative 5 times 4 is negative 20, plus 5 would be negative 15. Absolute value of negative 15 is 15, which is bigger than 13. Right? Or if I plug in a number that's bigger than 2, like 3. So 4 times 3 is 12, plus 5 is 17. The absolute value of 17 is bigger than 13. So we can see that numbers over here work, numbers that over here work. If I try to plug in something in this space like 0, 4 times 0 is 0, plus 5 is 5. Absolute value of 5 is not bigger than 13. So we can see that the numbers in this space don't work. Okay, so that's what we're finding here. All the numbers that do work, all the numbers that do work, all the numbers that don't work. Okay. Any questions about that first one? Okay. I'm gonna do one more with you guys and then have you guys do one on your own. So I have the absolute value of negative 2x minus 7 is greater than 1. And the first thing I want to do is split the problem into two. First time stays pretty much the same as it was. Just the bars go away. The second time, what was inside the bars doesn't change. But now I need to flip the symbol and the sign on the number. Okay. What's my first step? Add 7, run on Audrey. So we get negative 2x is greater than 8. Negative 2x is less than 6. Okay. Thanks, Kylo. What's our next step? Somebody who's not Audrey or Kylo.
Divide by -2.
Divide by -2. Thanks, Brian. So we get x and -4. Got x -3. Okay. So when we divide by a negative, though, remember to flip the symbol around. Again, something I caught students not doing on the homework. I'll let you know if if that's something I saw you not doing. So again, it might be something you need to write down, though. Okay. Anything solving wise you want to talk about before we talk about how to write the answer? Okay, Kenzie. Okay. So now we need to ask ourselves, is this an and or an or? So you should be saying, can a number be less than -4 and greater than -3? Or are there any numbers that are less than -4 and greater than -3? Any numbers like that? No? No, Kenzie? So since it's a no, Kenzie, what's that mean? It's an or problem, yep. Okay. Again, I would just take the smaller of the two, which happens to be the -4. So x is less than -4, or x is greater than -3. Just write it out. Okay. So there's our answer as far as that goes. And graph this one's going to be easy to graph since those numbers are so close together. Sophia, should I do open circles or closed circles? Open. Okay. And then Sophia, from the -4, should I graph to the left or to the right? Okay. And what about from the -3? Which way should I graph? Okay. So how do we know if our graph looks right? What should we be kind of judging here? What tells us if our graph looks right? Somebody else? Okay, so I have to say the arrows are going in opposite directions, right? So those or problems, yeah, good, Jared. Okay, the arrows are going away from each other. So just your really basic level, does my answer make any sense at all? I said or, the arrows are going away. That's what it better look like. Okay, if you say or and the arrows are doing this, something's bad is happening, right? You say arrows and the arrows are doing that, something bad's happening. And when you say or, the better look like that. At a very basic level. Okay. Of course, there's all other things you could have messed up, but at least your answer makes sense. Okay, doesn't just look like a big old pile of poop. Kyla, if you need to add all the numbers in the middle, it really kind of depends. Like I said, this one was easy to graph because the numbers were kind of right next to each other, so I didn't have like a whole bunch of stuff to add in the middle. Notice on the last one, I like skipped some spaces just because I didn't want to fill in those extra spots, even though it was only like two more numbers. So I like you guys to have some of the other numbers around there. I think we're going to do a problem later where the numbers are really far apart. So I barely put anything on it at all. But obviously the main thing I'm looking for is, are you getting the arrows going the right direction? Are you getting open circles versus the closed circles? Now I've told you I kind of take it easy on like the numbering stuff. But oops. Anything oops, here you guys want to talk about before I have you do one on your own? Okay. I want you guys to try this one. Throw your answers into the chat. When you're trying to type your answers, you have the two little inequality symbols down there on your keyboard. If you want, you can just type them the way they are. Or if you hit the option button and then the button, it'll do the line. So it'll do the equals to. So okay. Try it out. See what you get for answers. Let me know. Kyla, check your first one. Tion looks good. There you go, Kyla. Good, Audrey. Good, Jake. Anybody else? Yes, Audrey. You're good. Yep. Good, Jarrett. If you want to do the equal to ones, Jarrett, you just need to hit the option and then the button. You'll do it. But nothing you need to worry about right now. Good, Kenzie. I need help getting down to y is less than or equal to 4, or y is greater than or equal to 1/2. Okay. So is this an and or an or? Why is it an and, Kenzie? Okay. So she's saying the number can be less than 4 and greater than 1/2. Okay. So what I didn't see, any of you guys that were typing your answers, I didn't see any of you type it correctly, just FYI. So when you're doing that, make sure that we take that smallest number, so in this case the half, put that on the left, take the biggest number, put that on the right. The variable should go in the middle. Okay. And then, here we're opening up towards the 4. So I should open up towards the 4. Here we're opening up towards the y. So I should open up towards the y. Right, again, that with the compound inequalities, the and ones, they should always open towards the right as you're looking at them. Okay, so your answer should look like this. And then I'm going to go to graph this. Numbers are pretty close together. So should I be using open circles or closed circles here, Zoe? Open circles or closed circles, Zoe? Okay, closed, good. So of course on the 4, just have a closed circle. And then on the half, I'm going to put a closed circle where a half is and label that. And then Zoe, from the half, which way should I go? To the left or to the right? Left. And then what about from the 4, Zoe, which way, left or right? Okay. So does our answer make sense, right? We stop and ask ourselves, does our answer make sense? How do we know if our answer makes sense or not?
I don't think it makes sense.
No, why not, Jared?
I think the 4 have lines going to the right. I think it should go to the left.
Okay. Why is that?
Because when you read it, it says y is less than or equal to 4.
Okay.
So it'd be going towards the negatives, towards 0.
Okay. So Zoe, Jared's saying that we should switch this one so it points to the left because this says that y is less than 4. Does that make sense to you, Zoe, or is that do you still think you're right? Okay. All right. So now we have this answer. Let me fix this real quick. I got 2 lines. So then we stop and say, does this answer make sense? Kyla's saying the arrows are facing the same way. And I said the arrows should never point in the same direction. So we got a problem. The arrows should never both go right or both go left for what we're doing. So what's wrong with this? So Audrey's saying the half should be going right. Why is that, Audrey?
We moved it from the right side. Like originally we had y is less than 4 and y is greater than 1/2. And when we switched it, we didn't flip our symbol. But we split, I guess that's my guess.
Are you trying to talk about like why people are doing it wrong? Is that what you're trying to talk about, Audrey?
That wasn't me. That was Kenzie.
Oh, okay, Kenzie. Sorry. What were you trying to answer, Kenzie? What you were saying may have been right. It doesn't sound like you were answering my question, though.
Guess.
Okay. What I was asking Audrey how she said this should be pointing right, and I was asking her why it should be pointing right. Okay, and then she said, in the chat, y is greater than, right? So greater should be to the right. Okay. So when we see those arrows pointing towards each other, right, we should be graphing between the 2 dots. Right? So your choices are with the ors, they go away from each other. The ands should connect. Okay, so when you're making those judgments on your work, right, as soon as you write an and, as soon as you say the yes to that, then your graph better look like this. Okay? So if you write and then your graph does this, then they're going against each other. right? Those two things counteract each other. So something's bad's going on there. So if you say and, then it better do this. All right, look what it says. It says y is between those two numbers. So you better be talking about the numbers that are between them, like 2 and 1 and 3 and 3.7 and 1.4, like all those numbers that are between 1/2 and 4. Okay. So definitely, what it sounded like you were talking about, Kenzie, is like in this process here, if you forgot to switch the sign, yeah, that could definitely mix things up. What I was talking about is like here, once you have this, how do you know which way to graph? So if you got this part right, but then you make a mistake here, right? That's what I was asking about. So. Okay. All right, let's do one last one together. We'll be done. So you got the absolute value of 1/7 x plus 2 minus 5 is less than 3. So I know it's been a little while now, but when we started talking about absolute value problem, I guess maybe the second day or something like that, we talked about absolute value problems where things were not isolated. And so we talked about that idea that if there's things on the outside of that, they need to go away before you can split it. It's a pretty common mistake that we think that I just need to split, I need to split, I need to split. But anything that's on the outside, if this was if there's something multiplying here, or if there's something subtracting or adding here, those things need to go away before we can do the splitting. So what we called that was isolating. Okay. So in that case, I just need to add 5 to both sides, rewrite the problem. So now it needs to be less than 8. Okay. So let's watch out for stuff hanging on the outside. And then now we're going to break it in half. So the first one's pretty much the same, except for the bars are gone. The second one, we make sure that we flip the symbol and the sign on that right side. Okay. What's our next step? Strike 2. Okay. So I get 1/7 x is less than 6. 1/7 x is greater than -10. Definitely saw some people that weren't following SADMEP when they were solving, and like it really only seemed to affect them when there was fractions. For some reason, the fractions were messing up, and they were like multiplying by 7 as their first step, which can work if you're really careful about how you do it. But they were multiplying this by 7, and then they're multiplying this by 7, and that doesn't work. If you're going to multiply any part of an equality equation or inequality by something, you have to make sure you multiply the whole thing. And some people were multiplying here by 7 and like here by 7, but then they weren't multiplying that by 7. That messes everything up. Yeah. So you don't have to do this in the order that's this way, but if you don't, you have to be really careful about what you do and how you do it, because you can definitely make mistakes. But if you follow SADMEP, then those mistakes get kind of taken away. There's no opportunity to make that mistake because you're doing it in a different order. So just something to think about. That the reason I talked to you guys about SATMAP is because it's generally the easiest way to do the problems, the easiest order to undo them in. So just something to think about. Of course, we get rid of that 7 by multiplying by 7 on both sides. Again, remember the point of that is to cancel the 7s, not to turn that 1 into a 7 or something like that. And so, of course, 1x there is just x. So it's now solved. So x is less than 42. And then on the blue one, we get x is greater than negative 70. Okay. Any questions on getting to 42 or negative 70? Okay. Mason Upton, is this going to be an and problem or an or problem?
An or.
Or why's that? Why is that, Mason? Okay, can you type it out? Why is it an or? Okay, not sure why. Caitlin, what about you? Do you think it's an and or an or?
Did you say my name?
I said Caitlin, but Caitlin, you're here. Let's go.
Okay.
What you got?
It's an and problem.
An and? Why is it an and?
Because it's greater than 70, but less than negative 70, but greater than 40. So if you put it on a,
So what numbers would work for that?
what do you mean by that?
You said like it's greater than negative 70, but less than 42. Like what's a number that would fit in that?
0 would fit.
Okay, so you found a number that would work, right? That could
Yeah.
be both. Okay. All right. So negative 70, 42, those are pretty far apart, so I'm not going to do a lot of numbering here. Right? And so, and Caleb was just talking about 0 should work. Okay. So we have not equal to, so we should have an open circle there. We should have an open circle there. And then which way should I graph, Caleb? Should the arrows go towards each other or away from each other?
Put them towards each other.
Towards each other, right? So we're looking at that space in between those two numbers, right? And I forgot to write down the answer here. Negative 70 should be less than x, which should be less than 42. It should look like that when we write our answer as a compound inequality. We're talking about all those numbers in between there. So. And Caleb talked about the number 0 to see if it works, right? Go back to here and we plug in 0. So 1/7 of 0 is 0 plus 2 would be 2. So the absolute value of 2, which is 2. And then 2 minus 3 is negative 3. Or sorry, 2 minus 5 is negative 3. So the negative 3, which is what all this side, is less than 3. Okay, so by plugging in 0, we get an answer that works. And so we know that it's not, or that it's this space in here where answers are not numbers out here and not numbers out here. Okay. Anything feeling weird about any of this guys? Feel pretty easy or? Yes, Kyla. Do you mean by the inequality symbols, Kyla? When you say the signs face the same way? Yeah, so when you write it, they should always open up towards the right, because that's where bigger things are, right? When we do a number line, they should always open up towards the right. So 42 is bigger than x, and x is bigger than negative 70. And of course, 42 is bigger than negative 70. So they always open up towards the right. So yes, so you see that same thing here, right? They're opening up towards the right. The arrows point in different directions, right? One arrow points to the left and one arrow points to the right. The symbols open up in the same direction. And it's kind of like, because, if we looked at this one, right, when you read that, it's pretty easy to read, right? Because the y is on the left. And this one's easy to read because the y is on the left. But when we go to write it, we have to flip this one around, right? So the arrows should point in opposite directions. That's why they end up pointing towards each other. But because we flip this one around to write it easier, then they end up kind of facing the same direction. When it's an or, yeah, they should go in different directions, right? One should be a less than and one should be a greater than. Because we always put again, this is only if you write it this way, Kyla, where you put the variable in the front. I mean, technically I could write this -3 is less than x. I could flip this around and then the symbols would point in the same direction, but I have the problems written backwards from each other. So if you kind of follow that rule rule of thumb that you always put the variable first, then yes, they would point in opposite directions. Which is something we kind of ignore to get something else done, right? Here we're not putting the variable first, so it kind of messes that up. But this is a much simpler statement. You can see that y is between these two numbers. It kind of visually works well for us to change that here. We can see that this number is between these two numbers. So, Brian, did you have something?
Yeah, so it's or if the arrows are pointing away from each other, right?
Are you talking about when you say it, do you mean by the graph?
Yeah, you graph it like when you're doing it.
Yeah, if you graph an or, the arrows should point away from each other. If you graph an and, they should point towards each other.
Right.
So, yeah, they're still going in different directions, right? One's going left and one's going right. Okay,
Yeah.
there's still one going left and one going right, but they don't meet, or they do meet, right? But they're never both going right or both going left, as far as anything that we're doing.
Right.
Yeah. Anything else, guys? All right. There were a couple of you that left on Friday without sharing your work for the quiz, which was what somebody asked you guys to do. And I sent you a message on Google Class about that. I tried to text those of you that hadn't done that. Did not get responses back from all of you. Kenzie, Brian, Caleb, Mason, Upton, Aiden. I didn't get your work from you guys. And if you want to grade on your quiz, you need to submit that. Okay. And Kenzie, Brian, Caleb, Mason, and Aiden. Mason, Upton. Okay. I need your work submitted from your quiz in order for me to grade that.